Welcome back again, guys. Um, Last day today. Um, so yesterday we did some structuring. I'm gonna have another listen back. I haven't touched this since yesterday, and then see if there's anything that needs tweaking before we move on to um, mixing this tune down, or at least having a good go at it. So let's have a listen. Um, yeah, I mean, I think everyone sort of gets the drift of the track. I'm glad you guys are liking it, by the way. I think it sounds cool. Um, so I'm gonna say right from the start, when I mix tunes down, I like to mix by ear rather than by sort of looking at figures on any sort of plugins I use. I mean, nothing is wrong with doing that. It's just when I do mix like that, but like mix by numbers, I tend to confuse myself a bit because I tend to sort of lose track of what it is I'm actually trying to achieve. Um, so with mixing in general, my philosophy is sort of if it sounds right, it's good. It's obviously not always as simple as that, especially not when you're making club music. But I think it's more helpful to just try and train your ears and rely on your ears when you mix music down. So I reference a lot of other dance music when I mix my own music. um, if there's a track that's sort of in a similar vein, I don't just mean melodically or in any sort of way like that. I mean more like sonically, as in the loudness, what you're trying to sort of achieve with this track. If there's any tracks like that that you know, compare it to what it is you're mixing down, and try and figure out what it is they're doing to make that track sound the way they sound. I never learned mixing from any sort of like YouTube videos or anything like that. It's just something that I've um, come to learn over the years, and it's something that I've come to sort of do my way. But today I'm just going to be running you through how I'd roughly mix down a track, and then maybe go into some detail about other stuff. First off, I think it's really important to group your individual elements. So um, one great thing about Ableton 10 is the fact that you can have groups within groups. Um, I know that's not possible in Ableton 9, but honestly, if you have the means, um, upgrade, because having the ability to put groups within groups changed the way I mix completely, and it is so good, so helpful. Um, so I'm gonna basically group them by frequency. So the kicks I'm gonna put into one group. I'm just gonna mark these two. I'm just gonna label this kicks. Um, then claps. Although I'm not using this at the minute, so I'll just leave this off. Um, let's see, what is this? Okay, no, I wasn't using that. And then I guess here I'll put the percussion into one group along with the hi-hats. And now I know the hi-hats and the percussion don't exactly sit in the same place in the frequency range. But because they're relatively close together, I'm just gonna group them. What's good about being able to mix like this is that I can individually put my effects onto all of these smaller groups, but then I can then glue that all together on here in this mixing channel here. So yeah, we've got percussion and our hi-hats. Let me just rename this group. And then my rim and my clap, I'm going to process either separately, or I mean, for now, I'll just put it into the percussion group, just because the percussion and the claps will sit in similar frequency ranges. I've got all my different samples here. I'm going to leave these be, although I will group the vocal chops. Let me just rename that. Oops. That's just my side chain here. Let me actually just rename this to side chain. I've got my bases grouped here already. So I'm just gonna leave that be. But I will add this respace into the bass group. Oh, we've got the hi-hats that I added yesterday, these. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these into the drum group. So let me just scroll up here. Yeah, let's put them in with the hi-hats. Cool. What else have we got? Oh yeah. I've got this snare roll, which I'm also going to put into the drum group. Yeah, so I mean, organizing your project file is obviously a good idea at this point. Mine is not extremely organized, but just grouping stuff, so it makes it easier to sort of visualize and not lose track of what you're doing. Yeah, put this in here with the percussion as well. Now I'm just going to go ahead and listen to the track and see if there's any frequencies that sort of jump out at me instantly. But sort of my rule of thumb is that, you know, percussion, anything that isn't sub or bass or a kick doesn't need any low end at all. You just make it more difficult for yourself to mix everything else. So let's have a listen to what it sounds like from the beginning. So already you can, I don't know if you can tell, but the hi-hat has a little bit too much weight to it. So I'm just going to go in with just the auto filter and just go right about to say 100 hertz, like around here. Just cut anything below that, essentially. Maybe a bit more. You want to be careful not to go up too much, because you just lose, you lose body, it just starts sounding tinny. You need to try and find a balance between, you know, not having too much low end and it's sounding messy, and it also just not having any life anymore. So anywhere sort of around 100 hertz, maybe up to like 150. What I like to do as well is to isolate. So if, for example, if you have more percussive elements coming in the chorus, or more sort of hi-hats or cymbals or whatever, isolate those and just listen to the main bit. Because usually you would only be listening to this, so like this main bit here, you'd only be listening to it along with everything else, but you want to have a listen to it to like the percussion and stuff on its own, to see whether there's anything you've added that might need additional cutting. But we've already sort of covered that. And at this point, one thing I like to do is to turn my headphones like right down. I'm talking right now, my headphones is really, really quiet. And just to see if there's anything that jumps out at me. I'm gonna turn on this clap like a little bit. And go back, turn it back up. Let's add in the kick. Again, I'm going to turn my headphones down. This is a good way to be able to, because usually you'd be working on full volume or whatever. You need to give your ears sort of a bit of headroom. So basically by turning it down, you're able to pinpoint where there's elements that are jumping out too much. It's easier to hear those loud elements when the music is quiet. So turn your headphones down. And I recommend this while you're just working on the track as well. It's like turn your headphones down and kind of just listen to it and see if there's anything that pops out. And for me, 9 times out of 10, there's like that one percussive hit, or that one vocal chop, or that one instance of a sample that's like just that tiny bit too loud. And 9 times out of 10, it helps me spot those issues, so I can just iron them out pretty easily. I think this sounds all right for now. Um, let's go and do a little bit of processing. So I haven't got any processing on my kicks at the minute. Um, I've just left them in there clean. Just got my subby kick here and this one here. I'm just gonna whack a compressor on to the kick channel. I'm just gonna use. Let me just make sure I've got it saved, just so we don't run into any problems. Let's use fab filter compressor. I've got like a little bit of a cheat sheet that I use for compressing my drums and stuff. So I will post out. Let me actually put the cheat sheet that I found online into the chat right now. But this is a really good way to. I found this online like a couple months ago, and I've sort of changed the way I compress my drums from time to time. But right now, this is what I'm using, and this is sort of something that feels really good. So if you check the chat now, you'll see sort of roughly how I try and process my drums. So I've got 5:1 ratio on the kick, 25 to 50 milliseconds on attack, 100 milliseconds on release, and 4 to 10 decibels of gain reduction. Now, this isn't to say that this will always work, but it does work for me a lot of the time. So feel free to sort of use that, but obviously also like tweak to however you think it should sound like. So release is 100, so pretty fast release. There's only a short sample we're dealing with. And 1 second. And the threshold, sorry, gain reduction. Let's put the threshold down a little bit and see what that sounds like. So immediately we can hear the kick sounds a lot tighter now. So obviously the more I pull this down, the more you'll be affected by what the compressor is doing. And at this point, I mean, there's nothing I can sort of do apart from listen to it and see whether that's the kind of sound I'm going for. The more I push this to the left, the more it will sound compressed. And you don't want to over compress your drums too much because you want to be able to hear the drums breathing, as it were. So there's a bit of a sweet spot somewhere here. And I reckon it's somewhere around here because this just sounds squashed. This doesn't sound very good. This just sounds squashed. So I reckon somewhere around here. So that's my kick. Let's go ahead and do my clap quickly. I'm not gonna put any crazy compression onto the actual percussion channel. I'm just gonna focus on the elements that stick out the most. So I'm gonna check my clap and see if it sounds good on its own. It's a pretty inoffensive clap. So I'm gonna roll with it as it is. Ratio 4:1, attack 10 to 20 milliseconds. I think this sounds good. Here at this point here, the clap sounds a little tighter. It doesn't sound the high end isn't as jarring. So I'm gonna stick to sort of this bit here. Just a tiny, tiny bit of compression, nothing crazy. Let's see, maybe I have to make another group within another group. I might separate the hi-hats from everything else. Just put these together. Just so I can put some compression onto these hi-hats here. Especially if you've got a lot of information going on in your top end, so like a lot of hi-hats, a lot of very splashy hi-hats, which will often be the case. If you're making very, very driven club music, you want to make sure that those hi-hats aren't pounding the listener's ears. So I'm going to go with a ratio of, what's the cheat sheet say? 5:1. I'm going to use it as a rough guideline. The compression in this sounds good, but I'm going to go in here with some EQing. Because the hi-hats are really, really harsh at the minute. Because they're so digital, you really need to sort of make sure that they're not piercing your eardrums, essentially. So gonna close the resonance here a little bit. A lot of you might have heard of like subtractive EQing, but this is something I do sometimes, depending on the hi-hat sample, is I'll make a notch like this and kind of sweep through it and find the really harsh frequencies and just take them out. Just mirror it and just take it out this way. But let's see. Sorry, by the way, this will sound very horrible, but it has to be done. So right there's a really, really unpleasant, very, very resonant frequency here. So I'm just going to turn this down to make it nice and thin, and then mirror it the other way so it takes out that frequency. And immediately you can hear a lot of that harshness has been taken out, but the grit of the hi-hat is still there, and that's what I want. Drum and bass, in my opinion, has the best hi-hats in terms of mixing. Yes, absolutely. I mean, drum and bass producers are generally beasts at what they do. I was saying the other week to a friend, I don't know how drum and bass producers sit there and make the music sound the way they do, because I know I'd have a headache after about an hour, just from how technical and crazy the process is when you mix drum and bass. So let's see what it sounds like in context. This is one thing to remember as well. You might mix stuff soloed, and while that's fine, don't forget to listen to it in context of everything else, because ultimately that's what everyone else is going to be doing. So I'm just gonna solo just the drums. I'm gonna add these hi-hats here. I forgot that they were in there too. By the way, gonna keep my compression after my EQ, because you want the last thing on every signal is the compression. Um, when you learned mixing, was your main approach reference tracks, or did you just, or you just did what sounded good to you? Um, it was a mix of both. Um, I I had like sort of my reference tracks that I sort of tried to get my music to sound like, but especially when I was starting out, like at the very start, I had no idea what it was that needed to change, and I was like, "Oh, well, I'm following all of these tips, and my music isn't sounding any better. What is it that I'm doing wrong?" And the main thing that I learned from that is, the sounds that you use in the first place are like essential. Is so important to pick good samples. Is I can't like there's so much that goes wrong when you use shoddy sounding low quality samples. Basically, the better the samples are that you use, the easier your job is afterwards. And I think part of the mix down process starts as soon as you drag and drop your samples into your sampler or your MIDI channel or whatever. Your how good your mix down is going to be kind of starts there. Do you ever do gain staging with everything from zero? I never do, but I see it doing this. What I tend to do actually, um, I don't necessarily do that, but I was kind of doing it throughout us working on the track, but I like to take everything, like all elements, sort of down. Like I like to basically mark all individual elements and then go to the volume and sort of take it all down by a couple decibels. Um, just so the track itself isn't fighting against Ableton. It's just to give it a little bit more headroom. Um, what I used to do stupidly is just take down the master, but taking down the master doesn't solve any issues. It just makes the track quieter. Whereas you want the individual tracks to be quieter. It's also worth sort of going through like the signal chain to see if anything's clipping. Like for example here. Um, say I had a channel with like a bunch of effects on. Um, let's see if there's anything like that. Yeah, see for instance here, if I had like even more effects on here, and for example, if the bass channel was clipping, I could see where the source of that is by just looking at the volume meters while it plays. I can't see it right now because it's frozen, but oh yeah. So right now here everything's green, but if for example I couldn't figure out why this particular channel sounded so rough, you just have to follow the signal and see where the first instance of red is, and you see if there's any settings that you've put in that might be causing it to clip or anything like that. I learned the other day how important it is to make sure certain effects aren't clipping. Going into another effect can cause weird. Yep, absolutely. It's so easy to sort of load an effect or a plugin or whatever onto a channel and then kind of mess about with it, add other stuff into the chain, and then forget that it's even there. And you might be listening to the track being like, I wonder why this sounds so bad, or why this one particular sound sounds so jarring. So it's always really important to just look at the signal chain and see if there's anything that might be upsetting the rest of the tune, essentially. Let's go ahead and mute this and just see what the drums sound like again. I'm gonna turn down the open hi-hat like slightly, 3 decibel. listen to it. Let's play it again, maybe from here. See what the two-step bit sounds like. That rim, um, that rim has far too much low end in it. Let me just take the lows out. And the rule that I'm using here, the 100 hertz rule, obviously it applies to what I'm doing right now. But the thing is, if you're making like a sampley house track, um, one that sort of relies on the sample a lot, you know, things it can vary. So you really need to sort of decide what kind of vibe it is you're going for with the track, because the mix down of a song can change everything. I mean, how much high passing you use can make a track, the same track with the same elements, sound so different. So you kind of need to have almost like a mission statement in your head. I'm going to make this track sound really clean and polished, or I'm going to go for a more sort of hi-fi sound. I tend to sort of go in between both because of the nature of the tracks that I make. For example, with Want You There, I left in quite a lot of the bottom end in the elements, just because it felt I wanted to sort of emulate a lot of that sort of French early 2000s, late 90s French house feel. And the way they were mixing their music back then obviously isn't the same way we're mixing our music now. Where back then there was a lot more grit in dance music, and I mean it was often a case of, that's where the technical limitations were. But now we've got all these amazing plugins that can virtually just um, completely nullify frequencies underneath a certain range. It's very easy to be tempted to sort of make everything sound super, 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 super clean. But it is important to know, especially when you're sampling stuff like this, the tracks that we've sampled, sort of 80s R&B and soul, you know, keeping in those lower frequencies can often um, help breathe life into your music. Um, enough